With time, the unthinkable becomes thinkable. And with more time, the thinkable becomes accepted. This is the history of Western civilization. And this is the story of American healthcare. That's the story I'm going to share with you today. Barbara Wagner was a 64-year-old woman in Oregon, and she didn't have health insurance, so she became cared for under the Oregon Health Plan. She developed recurrent lung cancer, and she went to see her oncologist, and he recommended treatment with Tarceva, new chemotherapy. She went to get her medication and found out she couldn't. Instead, she received a letter from the state of Oregon saying they would not pay for her chemotherapy, but they would pay for hospice or for physician-assisted suicide. These pictures were taken from a reporter that went out to talk to her. She said, "I can't believe that they're not willing to pay for me to have a chance to live. Instead, they're willing to pay for me to die." She said, "I'm not ready to die." And she appealed her case, was denied the first time, appealed her case again, and was denied a second time. So government compassion sounds so noble, but in the end, whoever pays holds the power to choose. I want to tell a second story. It comes from back when I was in medical residency in the mid-1990s. I read this book by Peter Singer, Rethinking Life and Death. In that, he struggles with the problem of the rising cost of healthcare. And one of the solutions he proposes is that we change the definition of human life. Instead of being human at birth, you're not, quote, fully human until the 5th week of age. So if you're born with a disability, we can have you put to sleep because we can use those dollars we save by not treating kids with disabilities and using them for kids that are much more gifted. So this was back when I was in medical training, and at the end of medical training, you have to give a formal presentation. So I was choosing to rebut Peter Singer. And I started with the question, how did America reach a place in her history where one of our leading bioethicists could seriously propose the concept of infanticide as a way to deal with the rising cost of healthcare? So I went back and read some 60 or 70,000 pages of history and philosophy. And there's a remarkable pattern that flows through Western history. And once you understand this battle of worldviews, once you understand these two different ways of viewing the physician, two different ways of viewing patients, this starts to all become much more clear. And that's the story I'll tell you now. So we began with two ancient Greeks, Plato and Hippocrates. Hippocrates was born about 460 BC. Plato was born about 427 BC. And they really outline two different poles of medical ethics. And we'll swing this needle, or watch the swing of a needle from Plato to Hippocrates as it moves back and forth over the next 2,500 years. So actually, Plato's thinking represents the thinking in ancient Greece most closely. So we can see the bodies that disease has penetrated through and through, the physician would not have attempted to cure. He did not want to lengthen our good-for-nothing lives or to have weak fathers begetting weaker sons. If a man was not able to live in the ordinary way, he, being the physician, had no business to cure him. For such a cure would have been no use either to himself, or note these last four words, or to the state. So here we see for the first time, at least to my knowledge, in Western history, we see the role of the physician is really to look out for the welfare of the collective, the welfare of the state, not the well-being of the individual patient. Plato continues, these practices will treat the bodies and minds of your citizens who are naturally well endowed. As for the rest, those with poor physical constitution will be allowed to die. And you have to appreciate the poetry of Plato. And those with irredeemably rotten minds will be put to death. So this is a very different role of the physician than we're accustomed to understanding here in America. So as opposed to this, we see this other thinker, Hippocrates, who takes a very different perspective. In On Breast, he writes, the physician sees terrible things and touches on the loathsome, and from others' misfortunes harvests troubles of his own. There's a certain compassion, a certain reaching out from the physician to the patient to treat them as an individual. In his oath, he says, I'll not give a poison to anyone who asks to do so, nor will I suggest such a plan. In the same way, I'll not give a pessary to a woman to cause an abortion, but in purity and in holiness I will guard my life and my art.